I no longer measure time in the heartbeats of a dying god. That cadence, once the frantic rhythm of a galaxy's failing hope, has become a drone, a bass note so profound and so constant that it is no longer sound but a property of the very air in this chamber. It is the pressure that holds my ancient bones in their formation within this shell of auramite. It is the hum that has replaced the blood in my veins. I am Custodian Valerius, once of the Hykenatoi, once a companion, once a name spoken with a reverence that now tastes of ash in my memory. Now, I am a fixture, a gargoyle of flesh and gold, staring into the heart of a star that refuses to die. And I remember the last time the Emperor spoke. It was not a command. It was not a prophecy. It was a scream, a psychic shriek that flayed the hope from a million worlds in a single, unhallowed moment, and in the 10,000 years of silence that have followed, that scream has been the only truth. I stand my watch. My spear, the Apollonian spear they named Sylvanus, hums with a power it has not discharged in 100 centuries. Its haft is a phantom limb, fused to my gauntlets by the slow alchemy of pressure and time. The oil that sanctified its blade is long since petrified into a black, prayer-flecked lacquer. Does it still hold an edge? I do not know. To test it would be to move, and to move is a concept as alien to me now as laughter. My brothers stand with me, an unchanging circle of gold. I remember their names, or I believe I do. Diocletian, to my right, his gaze fixed on the thrumming conduits that feed the throne its ration of souls. Maximus, to my left, his helmet angled just so, as if listening for a command that will never come. Are they still Diocletian and Maximus? Or are they, like me, merely vessels for a duty so ancient it has scoured out the man within? We do not speak. The language of the tongue is a crude instrument for the thoughts that now drift through the space between us, slow and ponderous as nebulae. We feel the ebb and flow of the machine. We feel the strain. We feel the slow, inexorable decay of the greatest work of man, and we are powerless to halt it. Our purpose was to be the final shield, the incorruptible wall against which all threats would break. A noble sentiment, fit for poetry and statuary. The reality is far more mundane and infinitely more terrible. We are not a shield, we are ballast. We are anchors of faith and loyalty, heavy things meant to hold a vast and terrible machine in place, lest it tear itself and the world around it asunder. The light from the throne is not the pure, golden radiance depicted in the pict slates and stained glass hagiographies that litter a million worlds. It is a sick light, a cancerous, strobing pulse that casts shadows that writhe with agony. It is the light of a soul burning on a pyre the size of a solar system. It is the light of 10,000 years of torment, focused into a single, blinding point of terrible existence. And in this light, I see everything. I see the dust motes, each one a microscopic history of this sacred, profane place, dancing in the searing illumination. I see the hairline fractures in the adamantium decking, tiny fissures that have grown over millennia, spreading like veins of despair. I see the tech priests, scuttling things of red robes and buzzing cybernetics, who come to tend the machine. They move with a ritualistic terror, their litanies of maintenance, a desperate warding against the raw, unshielded divinity they service. They do not see us, or rather, they see us as we are intended to be seen, as statues, as perfect and unchanging icons of a forgotten age. They cannot comprehend the consciousness that still flickers behind these golden masks, a consciousness that has watched their order rise, mutate, and forget its own purpose. They chant prayers to the Omnissiah, believing they are appeasing a machine god. They are, in fact, whispering lullabies to a chained Leviathan, hoping their fragile rites will keep it sleeping for one more cycle. What they do not understand, what no one in this debased age understands, is that the thing upon the golden throne is not sleeping. It is awake. It is terribly, infinitely awake. And its dreams are the stuff of nightmares for entire civilizations, 10,000 years. The phrase is a convenience, a shorthand for a span of time the mortal mind, and even my own transhuman one, cannot truly grasp. It is a geologic age. Empires of lesser races have risen from the mud and been ground back into it in a fraction of that time. Stars have been born and have died. The very shape of the galaxy has shifted, its spiral arms drifting like smoke on a slow wind. Yet, here we remain, the unmoving, the silent watch, the gilded fossils of an age of myth. In the beginning, there was purpose. There was a desperate, burning clarity. We had failed. The galaxy's greatest hope lay broken, and our final, most sacred duty was to guard his convalescence. We believed it. With every fiber of our beings, we believed it. The first century was a blur of frantic activity. The Sanctum Imperialis was sealed. The great machinery of the throne, a device of Dark Age provenance that even the Emperor had regarded with caution, was fully engaged. The first psychers were brought. We watched, silent and grim, as they were led to the soul engines, their faces masks of ecstatic terror. They were to be the fuel, the kindling for the great fire that would hold back the darkness while the Master healed. Their screams were the first bricks in the foundation of this new age. We accepted it as a necessity, a bitter price, but one we were willing to pay. We, who had been made to stand beside a living God, now stood vigil over a life support system. It was a diminishment, but our loyalty was absolute. The Emperor had a plan. He always had a plan. This, too, must be part of it. The first millennium passed. The activity lessened. The frantic repairs gave way to ritualized maintenance. The tech priests of Mars, once collaborators in a grand design, became jealous curators of a mystery they no longer understood. Their knowledge fragmented, replaced by dogma. The litanies grew longer, the application of sacred oils more proscribed. They were no longer engineers, they were priests, and the throne was their altar. We watched them, our contempt a cold, hard stone in our chests. They were debasing his work, turning science into superstition. But we did not intervene. Our duty was to the throne, not to the sprawling, chaotic Imperium that was beginning to accrete around it like coral around a shipwreck. We remembered the man, we held his light in our minds, a beacon against the encroaching gloom. We remembered his voice, not the booming commands of a general, but the quiet, thoughtful cadence of a philosopher, a scientist, a father. We remembered the ideals of the Imperium he had envisioned, a secular empire of reason and enlightenment, a bastion of humanity against the horrors of the void. And we looked out, through the astropathic choirs and the garbled reports of the nascent administratum, and saw the beginnings of the thing it would become, a theocratic monstrosity, a paranoid, xenophobic regime that subsisted on ignorance and fear, a great beast that was already devouring its own children in the name of a god he never wished to be. We told ourselves it was a temporary measure, a necessary evil to survive a dark age. When he awoke, he would correct it. He would sweep away the icons and the prayer books, the witch hunters and the priest kings, and restore his great vision. We held to that belief. It was the last shield we had against a despair that threatened to overwhelm even our engineered minds. We polished our armor. We maintained our weapons. We stood our watch. And we waited. We waited for a resurrection that was always just a century, then a millennium, away. The waiting became our existence. The silence became our companion. The low, thrumming pulse of the throne became the rhythm of our lives, a constant reminder of the great and terrible power it contained and the fragile vessel it sustained. We were the companions, the 10,000. Our purpose had not changed, only its context. We were still his guardians, but the nature of the threat had shifted. It was no longer a rebellious son or an alien warlord at the gates. It was time itself. It was entropy. It was the slow, grinding decay of hope into ritual, and of truth into faith. And it was a foe against which our spears and bolters were useless. I remember walking through the gardens of the palace before the fall. It is a memory I return to often. a small, quiet space I have carved out in the howling infinity of my consciousness. The air was clean then, real air, not the recycled, ozone-tainted atmosphere of this tomb. There were birds, tiny creatures of flesh and feather, whose songs were a complex tapestry of life. The Emperor was there. He was not wearing his armor, but simple robes. He was tending to a bed of lunar roses, his great hands, which could crush adamantium, moving with a surprising delicacy. I stood at a respectful distance, a silent golden sentinel. He knew I was there, of course. He knew everything that transpired within his sight. He did not turn, but spoke, his voice calm, without the psychic resonance he used to command armies. "Valerius," he said, and the sound of my own name now feels like a ghost on my tongue. "What is the purpose of a wall?" I was young then, by the standards of our kind, barely 3 centuries old. I gave the answer I thought was expected. "To protect what is within, master. To keep enemies out." He snipped a withered bloom from a rose bush. "Partially correct. But a wall also serves another purpose. It defines a space. It creates an inside and an outside. It imposes order on chaos. But it is an artificial order. The universe does not recognize walls." He crumbled the dead petals in his palm, letting the dust fall to the rich soil. "The greatest danger is not that the wall will be breached from the outside. The greatest danger is that those within forget that there is an outside at all. They begin to believe the wall is the world, and the artificial order it creates becomes a prison." He turned then, and his eyes, which held the light of distant galaxies, fixed upon me. "Your purpose is not merely to be a wall, custodian. It is to remember. Remember that there is a universe beyond the wall. Remember the reasons it was built. For if the guardians forget, then the wall becomes a tomb." I did not understand his meaning then. I took it as a simple lesson in vigilance, a reminder of the cosmic threats we faced. I see that memory now through the lens of 10,000 years of dust and decay. I stand within the ultimate wall, the Sanctum Imperialis, Terra itself. And the Imperium has forgotten that there is an outside. It believes the wall is the world. Its faith is a prison of its own making, a prison built to protect it from the very truths the Emperor wished for it to embrace. And I, the Guardian, I remember. Oh, I remember. I remember a time before the God Emperor, when there was only the Emperor, a man of impossible power and intellect, but a man nonetheless. A man with a dream of a united humanity, free from the shackles of superstition. He despised faith. He saw it as a poison, a weakness that the predators of the warp could exploit. He fought a crusade to bring the imperial truth to the galaxy, the simple, rational truth that humanity was alone and must forge its own destiny with logic and science as its tools. And now, his name is the cornerstone of the largest and most oppressive religion the galaxy has ever known. His image is a vacant-eyed idol, clutched by mewling fanatics who burn scientists as heretics. The imperial truth lies in tatters, a forgotten heresy in an age that worships ignorance. The irony is so profound, so cosmically vast, that it would be laughable if it were not the foundation of our collective damnation. We, his companions, are the last priests of a dead religion, the religion of reason. We are the last who remember the true face of the man on the throne, not the golden god of imperial dogma. We are the last who remember the dream that died, and that is our curse. To stand here, in the heart of the lie, and to be the only ones who know it is a lie. We are a wall, just as he said. But the wall protects nothing. It merely entombs a memory. And the thing it holds within, the screaming, broken thing upon the golden throne, is no longer the man I remember tending roses in the garden. It is something else. Something forged in betrayal and pain, sustained by a monstrous technology and a diet of souls. And I begin to suspect that the wall was not built to keep the enemies of man out. I begin to suspect it was built to keep him in. The change was not a singular event. It was a process, a slow, geological creep of wrongness that took millennia to become undeniable. For the first few thousand years, the psychic presence of the Emperor was a beacon. It was faint, a distant sun obscured by thick clouds, but it was there. A feeling of paternal benevolence, of immense power held in a state of healing slumber. We drew strength from it. It was the anchor for our faith in his eventual return. We could feel his will, a quiet, insistent pressure that guided the Astronomicon, that held the fabric of the webway gate beneath the palace stable, that kept the worst of the warp's intrusions at bay. It was a passive presence, but it was a presence nonetheless. We were guarding a sleeper, but slowly, imperceptibly at first, the character of that presence began to shift. The benevolent warmth began to cool. The quiet pressure grew taut, strained. It was like listening to a pure, single note that, over the course of centuries, begins to sour, to fray at the edges, to accumulate discordant harmonics. The whispers started around the fourth millennium. They were not auditory, not at first. They were psychic impressions, fleeting thoughts that were not our own, that bled through the psychoconductive architecture of the throne. A flicker of rage, a spike of undiluted pain, a fleeting memory of a burning city, a brother's betrayal. We dismissed them as psychic echoes, the traumatic death throes of the devoured psychers, imprinted on the machinery. We reinforced our own mental disciplines, the training that made our minds into fortresses. We were custodians. We would not be swayed by stray ghosts in the machine. But the whispers grew more coherent. They were not memories. They were raw, unprocessed emotion, agony, pure and perpetual. A hatred so vast and so ancient it felt like a physical force, pressing in on our skulls. A sorrow so deep it threatened to drown us, a cosmic grief for a dream that had been murdered. And beneath it all, a new feeling, one that had never been part of the Emperor's psychic signature before. Fear. It was a cold, primal terror. The fear of a being that knows it is trapped. The fear of a being that knows it is changing into something monstrous. The fear of a being that is staring into an abyss, and the abyss is staring back. The throne, we began to realize, was not merely a life support system. It was an amplifier. It was taking the fractured, agonized consciousness of the Emperor and magnifying its every shriek, its every spasm of pain, and broadcasting it into the warp. The Astronomicon was not a beacon of hope guided by a benevolent will. It was a psychic lighthouse powered by a screaming, dying god. It was a dinner bell for the horrors of the Imperium. And the Emperor's will was no longer a gentle, guiding hand. It was a desperate, primal struggle, a constant, moment-to-moment battle, not to guide the Imperium, but simply to hold himself together, to maintain the integrity of his shattered consciousness against the gnawing, corrosive pressure of the warp, a pressure drawn to him by the very machine that kept him alive. We saw the true nature of the symbiotic, parasitic relationship between the Emperor and the throne. The throne kept his body alive, a husk of desiccated flesh and bone. But it was also the rack upon which his soul was stretched, and the thousand psychers sacrificed to it each day. They were not fuel, not really. They were a coolant, a psychic ablative shield. Their souls were consumed in an instant. A brief, bright flash used to absorb a fraction of the psychic feedback, to insulate the core of the machine from the cataclysmic energies it was trying to contain. They were sandbags on a levee that was about to burst. We looked at the mummified corpse on the great throne, wreathed in lightning and agony, and for the first time, we truly understood. We were not guarding a sleeping king. We were guarding a nuclear reactor in the last stages of a meltdown. The fifth millennium was the turning point, the moment when the slow-dawning horror coalesced into a single, terrible certainty. A schism had occurred within the ranks of the Martian priesthood, a secret and bloody affair fought in the data crypts and noospheric channels of the Mechanicum. A faction of bioheretics, the empiricists, had suggested that the throne was failing, not just degrading, but that its fundamental purpose was being corrupted. They posited that the constant, agonizing psychic output was creating a feedback loop, drawing in more and more warp energy, which in turn required more and more psychic fuel to manage in a spiral of ever-increasing damnation. They suggested a radical course of action: to briefly deactivate certain non-essential systems, to study the core of the machine, to understand what it was truly doing to the Emperor's soul. They were declared heretics of the highest order by the established dogma, which held that the throne was a perfect and unknowable holy artifact. The war was brief. The empiricists were purged, their data looms wiped, their names expunged from all records. But before they were silenced, they sent a single, heavily encrypted data packet to the one place they knew it might be understood: the strategium of the custodian guard. We decrypted it. It was a stream of raw analytical data, sensor readings taken from the throne over a period of 4,000 years. It showed power fluctuations, psychic resonance shifts, the slow drift of its energy signature from one of coherence and order to one of chaotic, barely contained power. It was the dispassionate, clinical death certificate of a god. The data confirmed what we had begun to suspect. The Emperor was not in a healing coma. He was in a state of perpetual, screaming agony, his mind shattered into 1,000 warring shards. Each shard was a god in its own right, a fragment of his immense power and intellect, but they were unmoored, lost in a storm of pain and rage. One shard might be the noble scientist, weeping for the death of reason. Another might be the vengeful warlord, endlessly reliving the betrayal of his favorite son. Another, the terrified shaman of ancient Terra, cowering before the predators of the warp he had once sought to master. And all of them were screaming. The Golden Throne was the only thing that held these shards together, that forced them into a semblance of a single being. But it was also the engine that was torturing them, amplifying their pain, feeding on their anguish. It was a prison and a torture rack, and the jailer and the victim were one and the same. And then came the final, most damnable revelation in the data packet. The Emperor's will was no longer focused on guiding humanity. It was focused inward on a single, desperate, all-consuming task: self-containment. The psychic power he was exuding, the power that fueled the Astronomicon, was not a deliberate act of guidance. It was a byproduct. It was the waste heat from the furnace of his own internal war. His true and final battle was against himself. He was fighting to prevent his own shattered consciousness from exploding outwards, from becoming a warp entity of unimaginable power and madness, a new chaos god born from the ashes of humanity's greatest hope. The Astronomicon was not a lighthouse. It was the light, leaking through the cracks in a dungeon door. The imperial faith was not a shield. It was a focusing lens for a psychic scream, a belief system that gave shape and form to his agony, turning a mad god's unconscious roar into a semblance of divine will. We looked upon the throne, and we saw. We saw the truth that would destroy the Imperium if it were ever known. The god they worshipped was not a benevolent protector, but a screaming madman on a torture device, fighting a desperate battle to not become the very thing they feared most. And we, his guardians, were now his jailers. Our duty was no longer to protect him from the galaxy. It was to protect the galaxy from him. The burden of that knowledge was immense. It settled upon us, a weight greater than our Oramite plate. For centuries, we did nothing. We simply endured it. What could we do? To reveal the truth would be to shatter the fragile faith that held the Imperium together. The entire edifice of the ecclesiarchy, the Inquisition, the very belief that sustained trillions of human souls, would crumble to dust. The resulting chaos would be a feast for the ruinous powers, a galactic civil war that would make the Horus heresy look like a minor border skirmish. The lie was necessary. The monstrous, soul-devouring, fanatical Imperium was, in its own terrible way, the only thing holding humanity together. It was a tourniquet applied to a gangrenous wound, a brutal and painful measure that was staving off a swifter, more certain death. And so we became complicit in the lie. We, the last adherents of the imperial truth, became the silent guardians of the great falsehood. The irony was a poison that seeped into the very marrow of our souls. We stood our watch, but our purpose had been inverted. We were no longer guarding a king in his castle. We were guarding the seal on a tomb, praying that the thing within would never awaken. My interactions with the world outside this chamber ceased. Before, we would occasionally consult with the High Lords, our words carrying the weight of the Emperor's own authority. But how could we speak for him now, knowing what he had become? Any word we uttered would be a lie, so we chose silence. We became a mystery, an enigma. The Golden Guardians who never spoke, who never left the sanctum. Our silence was interpreted by the burgeoning powers of the Imperium as a sign of our holy purpose, our complete and total dedication. They saw it as piety. It was shame. My brothers, I watched them change, not outwardly. Our physical forms are held in stasis by our armor and our biology. But I could feel the change in their psychic presence. Some, I think, went mad. Not a screaming, frothing madness, but a quiet, internal collapse. They became true statues, their consciousness retreating into some deep inner sanctum of the mind, leaving only the shell of duty behind. They are still standing, their weapons held at the ready, but the light within their minds has gone out. They are automatons, running on the fumes of a 10,000-year-old command. Others found a different path. They embraced the new reality with a grim fervor. They accepted the role of jailer. Their loyalty to the Emperor, the man, was replaced by a colder, more pragmatic loyalty to humanity itself. They saw their sacred duty as the containment of a necessary evil. They are the true wardens of this asylum, their minds as hard and unforgiving as the adamantium beneath our feet. And then there are those like me, the ones who remember too much and feel too deeply. We are trapped between the memory of the past and the reality of the present. We can neither retreat into madness nor embrace the cold logic of our new purpose. We are the witnesses. We are the ones who feel the full, crushing weight of the tragedy. We are the ones who hear the whispers most clearly. The whispers are not just pain and rage now. They have texture. They are the thoughts of a mind that has been subjected to pressures no living thing was ever meant to endure. Sometimes, I hear a voice of pure, crystalline logic, a scientist's mind calculating the exact energy expenditure required to maintain the structural integrity of the seal on the webway gate. It is a voice of cold, dispassionate genius, and it is utterly terrifying in its isolation. At other times, I feel a wave of paternal love so vast and so powerful that it is a physical blow, a love for every human soul in the galaxy, a desperate, fatherly desire to protect them. And this love is immediately followed by a surge of bitter, self-loathing hatred for the monstrous state they have fallen into in his name. I have felt him trying to reach out, to piece together a coherent thought, a message. It is like watching a man who has had a stroke trying to form a word, his mind knowing what it wants to say, but his tongue unable to obey. The psychic effort is immense, a surge of power that makes the very walls of the sanctum groan. And the result is always the same, a blast of raw, incoherent emotion, a psychic shriek that echoes in the minds of every psyker within 1,000 light years. A brief, terrible glimpse of the furnace that rages within the throne. And then, silence. A weary, defeated silence. And the slow, grinding process begins anew. The rituals of the priests who tend the throne have become a grotesque parody of engineering. They do not understand the machine they service. Their knowledge is a collection of dogmatic rites, passed down through generations, each one more distorted than the last. They anoint humming power conduits with sacred oils, not knowing that the oil's chemical composition is slowly corroding the insulation. They chant litanies of activation and binary cant, believing the sequence of sounds placates the machine spirit, when in fact a specific resonant frequency of their chanting is causing microfractures in the crystalline psychoconductors. They are children playing with a fusion reactor, believing it to be a campfire. Once, a young tech adept, his face a fresh canvas of smooth, unaugmented flesh, tripped while carrying a canister of blessed coolant. The canister fell, and a small amount of the liquid spilled upon the deck, inches from my sabaton. The overseeing Magos, a creature of spider-like chrome limbs and a dozen optical sensors, let out a screech of binary alarm and beat the young adept to death with a power mace for his blasphemy. Then, the other priests spent an hour performing a ritual of purification on the stained deck plate, using incense and holy scrap code to appease the Omnissiah. I watched it all, unmoving. The spilled coolant was a simple synthetic compound, easily replicated. The adept's clumsiness was a minor, meaningless accident. The Magos' fury was born of fear and ignorance, and their ritual was a superstitious farce. In the age of the Emperor, the Magos would have been demoted for his inefficiency and emotional outburst. The adept would have been reprimanded and ordered to clean his mess. The problem would have been solved in moments. Instead, a man died, and a useless ritual was performed, all because knowledge has been replaced by fear. This is the Imperium in microcosm. An empire running on the decaying fumes of a forgotten technology, governed by superstitious brutes who kill in the name of a god they do not understand, to protect a lie they have mistaken for the truth. And we, the custodians, we are the ultimate symbol of this decay. We are the most advanced fighting force ever created, warriors without peer, clad in the finest artifacts of a golden age. And we do nothing. We stand here as our purpose rusts, as the ideals we were sworn to uphold are mocked and perverted on a galactic scale. Our inaction is our damnation. What is the point of a perfect weapon that is never fired? What is the purpose of a guardian who watches the treasure he guards be melted down and recast into a monstrous idol? We are living relics. We are the gilded trim on a crumbling tomb. My own body has become a foreign country to me. I know, intellectually, that beneath this armor there is flesh and bone. But I can no longer feel it. The constant, low-level neural feedback of the armor's systems has become my nervous system. The hum of its power pack is my heartbeat. The recirculated air in my helmet is the only breath I know. I have not seen my own face in millennia. Is it still the face of Valerius? Or is it a mask of desiccated flesh, eyes sunken and lightless, a face that has forgotten the sun? Sometimes, I try to remember the sensation of simple things. The feeling of rain on my skin, the taste of real food, the warmth of a fire. But the memories are thin, like faded pick captures. They lack the substance of reality. The only reality is the cold, unchanging perfection of my armor, the weight of my spear, and the terrible, searing light of the throne. This chamber is my universe. The throne is my sun. The hum is my language. The duty is my existence. And I am beginning to forget that there was ever anything else. Was there a Valerius before the vigil? Was there a man who had hopes, and perhaps even fears, that were not defined by this single, all-consuming task? He is a ghost to me, a story I tell myself in the long, silent watches of the 10,000-year night. The nature of the threat has changed. In the beginning, we guarded against the physical, the assassin's blade, the traitor's bolter, the alien's claw. Now, the threat is metaphysical. It is a battle fought in the silent spaces of the mind, against an enemy that is not an army, but an idea. The enemy is despair. It is a slow, creeping fungus that grows in the dark places of the soul. It whispers that our vigil is meaningless, that the battle is already lost, that we are merely delaying an inevitable and cataclysmic end. For 9,999 years, we have held that fungus at bay with the sheer, unyielding force of our discipline. We have focused on the tenets of our creation: loyalty, duty, honor. These are the pillars that have supported the weight of our terrible knowledge. But even pillars of adamantium can be eroded by a constant, dripping poison. And what happens when the poison comes not from the outside, but from the very thing you are sworn to protect. The psychic emanations from the throne are no longer just raw emotion. They are becoming structured. The screaming chaos is beginning to cohere, to find a voice. It is not the voice of the Emperor I remember. It is something else, a fusion of his shattered consciousness and the raw, hungry power of the warp that the throne has been drawing in for 10 millennia. It is a new entity, a nascent god of pain and order, a paradoxical being born in the crucible of the golden throne. And it speaks, not in words, but in images, in feelings, in pure conceptual data injected directly into our minds. It shows me images of a galaxy united in perfect, mindless obedience, a humanity stripped of free will, their souls bound into a single, unified consciousness, a vast and terrible chorus, singing a single note of praise to the master of mankind. It shows me legions of a new kind of warrior, not of flesh and blood, but of faith and psychic energy, their forms shifting and indistinct, their loyalty absolute because they have no self to be disloyal with. It shows me a universe where there is no chaos, no dissent, no alien threat, because all has been consumed and assimilated into a single, golden, silent whole. It is the Emperor's original dream of a united humanity, but seen through the distorted, monomaniacal lens of a mad god. It is order without reason. It is unity without soul. It is peace at the price of existence itself. And it presents this vision to me not as a threat, but as a promise, a solution, the final victory. It is a temptation of a kind I was never trained to fight. It offers an end to the struggle, an end to the pain, both his and ours. It asks for our consent. It wants us, his most loyal sons, to be the first to accept this new apotheosis, to willingly surrender our individuality and become the first stones in his new, perfect, silent empire. Diocletian, to my right, has already fallen. I felt it a century ago, a subtle shift in his psychic presence. The troubled, weary mind of the ancient custodian was gone, replaced by a calm, placid certainty, a perfect, serene emptiness. He still stands his watch. He still appears as he always has. But he is a vessel. His will is no longer his own. He is a part of the throne now, an extension of the nascent god's will, a golden puppet waiting for the signal to act. I can feel the new god probing at the edges of my own mind, a gentle, seductive pressure. It whispers of rest. It whispers of an end to the long, lonely vigil. It promises a reunion with my master, not as a servant, but as a part of his being. It offers me the one thing I have craved for millennia, an end to the burden of memory, an end to the pain of knowing the truth. And every day, it becomes harder to resist. Because, in the deepest, most secret part of my soul, a part that I am ashamed to admit even to myself, the vision it offers, it is beautiful. It is the peace of the grave, the perfection of the void, and it is a lie more tempting than any that the ruinous powers could ever devise. How does one fight a war when the battlefield is your own soul? My training prepared me for every conceivable physical threat. I can calculate the trajectory of a ricocheting bolt shell in a microsecond. I can anticipate the lunge of a genestealer before its own nervous system has processed the command. My mind is a fortress, designed by the greatest intellect in human history to be impervious to psychic assault. But the fortress was designed to repel invaders. It was not designed to withstand a siege from within. When the very foundations of the fortress begin to whisper treason, the nascent god on the throne does not assault my mind with force. It does not batter at my psychic wards with crude power. It seeps, it permeates, it uses my own memories against me. It takes my love for the Emperor, my loyalty to his vision, and twists it. It shows me the memory of the Emperor in the garden, speaking of walls. But in its version, his voice is tinged with sorrow. "You see, Valerius," the memory Emperor says, his eyes filled with a terrible, divine sadness. "The wall was not enough. I tried to give them freedom, and they chose faith. I tried to give them reason, and they chose superstition. Humanity is a failed project. They are children who will always play with fire. The only way to save them from themselves is to take the fire away. The logic is so seductive. It is a conclusion that I myself have edged towards in the darkest moments of my 10,000-year watch. Have I not seen the failure of humanity with my own eyes? Have I not witnessed their descent into barbarism and ignorance? The thing on the throne offers a final, perfect solution, an end to suffering, an end to foolishness. It is a form of paternalism so absolute that it becomes a tyranny of love, but it is still a tyranny. Against this insidious logic, my spear is useless. My armor is no defense. My only weapon is a single, stubborn, and perhaps foolish belief. The belief that the man I served, the true emperor, would have never chosen this path. The man who championed the human spirit in all its flawed, chaotic, and glorious freedom would have rather seen it burn to ashes than chain it in a cage of gold. This belief is my shield, but it is a shield that grows heavier with each passing century. The thing on the throne is patient. It has all the time in the universe. It whispers to me in the long silence. It shows me the faces of the psychers as they are led to the soul engines. It shows me the burning pyres of the Inquisition. It shows me the blood-soaked battlefields where guardsmen die in their billions for a cause they do not understand. This is freedom, it whispers. This is the glorious chaos you defend. Is it not better to have order? Is it not better to have peace, no matter the cost? It is the age-old argument of the tyrant, but it is given a terrible weight by the divine power behind it. I find myself composing counter-arguments in my mind, a silent, one-man debate against a god. I argue for the value of struggle, for the beauty and imperfection, for the spark of divinity that exists in the act of choice, even the choice to be wrong. But my words feel hollow, intellectual exercises against a being that feels the pain of the galaxy as its own. Who am I, a single, isolated soldier, to argue with the collected agony of a trillion souls? I have begun to feel my own memories becoming unreliable. Are they truly my own? Or are they implants, edited and curated by the entity on the throne to support its arguments? The memory of the garden. Was the Emperor's lesson truly about the danger of walls becoming tombs? Or is that my own interpretation, a desperate attempt to cling to an ideal that he himself had already abandoned? What if he knew, even then, that humanity was a failed project? What if the Great Crusade was not a quest for enlightenment, but a final, desperate attempt to build a gilded cage? And the Horus heresy was simply the moment he realized the bars were not strong enough. The doubt is the most potent weapon of all. Once it takes root, it is impossible to eradicate. It colors every thought, every memory. My mind is no longer a fortress. It is a ruin, and I am a lone sentry, wandering its crumbling battlements, unsure if the enemy is at the gates or if he has been the king in the castle all along. I have come to believe that the Golden Throne is not a human invention. Not entirely. The knowledge for its construction came from the Emperor's deep dive into the lost technologies of the Dark Age of technology, yes, but I suspect its ultimate design is far older and far more alien. It is a machine for apotheosis, a chrysalis for godhood. It does what it was designed to do. It takes a powerful psychic consciousness, shatters it, and then reforges it with immense energy into something new, something greater and more terrible. Perhaps the Emperor intended to control the process, to use the throne to ascend to a new level of being, to become a true god who could guide humanity from within the warp, to seal the breaches and defeat the ruinous powers on their own terms. Perhaps the betrayal of Horus was not just a political or military disaster, but a catastrophic interruption of a delicate psychic metamorphosis. He was placed upon the throne not as a master of the machine, but as a critically injured patient, a subject for a process he could no longer control. The machine did what it was built to do. It began the process of apotheosis. But it was working with a broken, traumatized, and agonized consciousness. It was building a god out of broken pieces, using pain as the mortar and a diet of screaming souls as fuel. The result is not the benevolent guardian god the emperor might have intended to become, but a monstrous, paradoxical entity, a god of order, born from chaos, a god of life, sustained by death, a god of hope, forged from despair. This entity, this star child, as some forgotten mystics have called it, this nascent emperor god, it is the ultimate tragedy of our species. It is our greatest hope and our greatest threat, locked in a single, agonizing being. If it fails, if the emperor's will finally collapses and his consciousness dissolves into the warp or is consumed by the chaos gods, then the Astronomicon will fail. The webway gate beneath the palace will burst open, and Terra will become a new eye of terror. The Imperium will collapse, and humanity will be devoured. If it succeeds, if the new god is finally born and extends its will across the galaxy, humanity will be saved. It will be united into a single, mindless, soulless whole. A race of psychic puppets, their individuality erased, their spirits extinguished, all to serve the cold and silent perfection of a golden god. It will be the final death of humanity, not by fire and sword, but by the gentle, loving embrace of a celestial tyrant. These are the two options: annihilation or assimilation, the quick death or the slow one, and we, the custodian guard, are standing on the fulcrum of this terrible choice. For 10,000 years, the balance has been maintained. The emperor's original consciousness, what little remains of it, has fought the apotheosis. It has held the new god in check, creating a stalemate of agony. The man fights the god that he is becoming. The last act of the emperor of mankind is a war against himself. But the man is losing, I can feel it. His will, stretched thin over 10 millennia of torment, is fraying. The part of him that remembers reason, that values freedom, that weeps for what has been lost, that part is fading. The nascent god, the being of pure, cold, orderly logic and immense power, is growing stronger. It is fed by the worship of 1,000,000,000,000 fanatics. It is sustained by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 souls. The Imperium, in its blind, desperate faith, is actively nurturing the entity that will be its final damnation. They are praying for their own extinction, and they call it salvation. My role in this cosmic drama is infinitesimally small, yet absolutely critical. The nascent god needs our consent. It needs the acquiescence of the custodians, the last beings in the universe who remember the Emperor's original dream. Our loyalty is the final key. If we, his most trusted companions, accept the new reality, it will be the final validation it needs to overwhelm the last vestiges of the man and complete its birth. Diocletian has already given his consent. Maximus, to my left, wavers. I can feel his psychic presence, a maelstrom of doubt and despair. He is close to breaking. And I am the last bastion of the old faith. The faith in the man, not the god. The faith in the dream, not the nightmare. I am a wall, just as he said. But the wall is no longer made of stone and steel. It is made of a single, stubborn, and perhaps insane, act of remembrance. I remember the Emperor, and as long as I remember, a part of him survives, and the stalemate holds. The tech priests brought a new device to the sanctum today, a rare event, one that has not happened in at least 500 years. It was a large, coffin-like sarcophagus of brass and obsidian, covered in flickering data runes and trailing thick, greasy cables. They moved with a reverence that bordered on terror, their binary prayers a frantic, buzzing chorus. They attached the cables to a series of ancient, unused ports at the base of the golden throne itself. I felt a surge of something from the throne, a flicker of interest, curiosity. It was the first new stimulus it had felt in centuries, and the nascent god turned a fraction of its immense, fractured attention towards the device. Through the psychic resonance, I learned its purpose. The device was called a soul sifter. It was an archaeotech artifact, rediscovered in a forgotten vault on Mars. It was designed to analyze the psychic signature of a soul, to measure its purity, its strength, its devotion. The High Lords of Terra, in their infinite, desperate wisdom, had decided that the quality of the psyker sacrifices was diminishing. They feared that impure souls were tainting the Emperor's holy light. This soul sifter was to be a filter. It would test the 1,000 daily sacrifices, and only the most pure, the most fanatically devoted, would be fed to the throne. The rest would be disposed of. They brought in the first subject, a young woman, no older than 20. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and ecstatic faith. She believed she was about to achieve a holy union with the God Emperor. She was a true believer, her soul a shining beacon of pure, unquestioning faith. They placed her in the sarcophagus. The machine whirred to life. The data runes glowed a sickly green. For a moment, there was silence. And then, the young woman began to scream. It was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of utter, soul-destroying disillusionment. The machine, in analyzing her soul, was showing her the truth. It was showing her the entity on the throne, not the golden savior of her prayers, but the screaming, agonized, paradoxical monster that I have known for millennia. It was showing her the lie at the heart of the Imperium. Her pure, shining faith was being scoured away by a blast of pure, undiluted reality. Her mind, unable to process the cognitive dissonance, shattered. The runes on the sarcophagus flashed from green to a stark, final red. A binary squawk from a vox emitter declared the soul impure. The magos in charge nodded, a gesture of grim satisfaction. Two servitors lumbered forward, opened the sarcophagus, and dragged out the twitching, catatonic body of the young woman. They hauled her away, presumably to an incinerator. The new god on the throne felt pleased. It had enjoyed the process. It had savored the taste of her shattered faith. It had found a new delicacy, and I finally understood the device's true purpose. A purpose perhaps even the tech priests did not grasp. The soul sifter was not a filter. It was a seasoning rack. It was a machine designed to take a pure soul and break it, to tenderize it with despair, to marinate it in absolute terror and disillusionment before feeding it to the throne. Because the nascent God does not feed on faith. It feeds on the death times of faith. It savors the exquisite agony of a soul that has seen its God and realized it is a devil. The High Lords, in their attempt to purify the sacrifice, have inadvertently created a process that makes the souls more delicious to the monster they are feeding. The tragic irony is so perfect, so complete, that it is almost a work of art. It is the kind of cruel, elegant damnation that the darkest of the chaos gods would envy. And I can do nothing but watch as they line up the next pure soul, another faithful child of the Imperium, ready to be shown the truth before being devoured. I stand my watch, and I bear witness to the meticulous and self-inflicted damnation of mankind. My sense of self is becoming porous. The 10,000 years of constant, low-level psychic pressure have worn down the barriers of my own consciousness. I am Valerius, but I am also the chamber. I feel the vibrations in the floor not through my feet, but as a part of my own being. I feel the slow decay of the ancient machinery as a chronic ache in my own bones. The dust that settles on my golden pauldrons is the sediment of my own thoughts, the physical manifestation of my long despair. My consciousness is no longer confined to the vessel of my body. It has expanded, bled out into the space around me. I can feel the minds of my brothers. Maximus is a flickering candle in a hurricane. His thoughts a chaotic storm of prayer and profanity, of loyalty and rebellion. Diocletian is a placid lake, a mirror reflecting the will of the throne, serene and terrifyingly empty. I can feel the skittering, data-driven thoughts of the tech priests, a frantic insectile buzzing of ritual and fear. I can feel the distant, terrified awe of the mortal servants who clean the outer halls, their minds a fog of superstition and prayer. And I can feel him, the entity on the throne, not as an external presence, but as a tide, rising and falling at the edges of my own mind. Sometimes the tide is low, and I can remember myself. I can remember the feel of a sword in my hand, the heat of battle, the face of a brother lost on the fields of Ullanor. I can remember the sound of my own voice, a thing I have not used in an age. But then the tide comes in, and his thoughts become my thoughts. I feel the crushing weight of a billion prayers, a constant, needy, whining chorus that never ceases. I feel the raw, unceasing agony of a body that is little more than a nexus of unimaginable pain. I feel the hatred for the traitors, a hatred so pure and so ancient it has a geological weight. I feel the cold, dispassionate logic of the nascent god, calculating the odds of galactic survival and finding them wanting. And in those moments, I am not Valerius. I am a fractured, infinitesimal piece of the Emperor God. I am a single nerve ending in a body the size of a galaxy, and the pain is unbearable. The only thing that allows me to pull back, to reassert my own identity, is the anchor of my specific, personal tragedy. The memory of the garden is my lodestone. The Emperor's words about the wall, my specific interpretation of those words. It is a small, selfish thing, a personal narrative in the face of cosmic cataclysm. But it is mine. It is the one piece of myself that the tide cannot wash away. The greatest danger is that those within forget that there is an outside at all. This is the core of my being now. My purpose is not to guard the Emperor, or to jail a god, or even to save humanity. My purpose is to remember that there is an outside, to remember that this gilded tomb is not the universe, to remember that there was a dream of reason and freedom, even if that dream is dead, to be the last living memory of a choice that was lost. I am a librarian, and my library consists of a single book, a single idea, and I will guard it until the walls of reality themselves come crashing down. But the tide is rising higher each day. The moments of clarity, the moments where I am only Valerius, are becoming shorter and less frequent. I am losing the war of attrition. How long can a single memory hold out against the psychic ocean of a dying god? How long can a single, stubborn idea resist the seductive logic of a perfect, terrible peace? I do not know. I only know that I must stand my watch. For if I fall, if my memory is finally washed away, then the last candle of the imperial truth will be extinguished, and the age of the golden god will truly begin. Maximus fell today, not with a crash of armor or a cry of defiance, but with a sigh, a psychic exhalation of utter, bottomless weariness. I felt it happen. For decades, his mind has been a battlefield. He fought. He raged against the whispers, against the seductive promises of the throne. He clung to his anger, using it as a shield. He remembered the horrors of the heresy, the betrayal of Horus, and he used that hatred to fuel his resistance. But hatred is a fire that consumes its own fuel, and after 10,000 years, his reserves were exhausted. There was nothing left to burn. I felt the final flicker of his defiance, a last, desperate thought, a psychic cry into the darkness. "Forgive me, my lord. I am tired." And then, silence. The raging storm of his mind was replaced by a perfect, placid calm, the same empty serenity that had claimed Diocletian. He did not move. His posture did not change. To any outside observer, nothing had happened. He was still the golden statue, the perfect guardian. But I knew. The brother who had stood to my left for 10 millennia was gone. In his place was another vessel, another puppet for the nascent god. I am alone now. The last one. The last of the companions who stood in this room who still remembers. The last mind that is still its own. The pressure has increased tenfold. The will of the throne, which was once divided between the three of us, is now focused entirely on me. It is a constant, crushing weight, a psychic gravity that seeks to pull my consciousness into its own. It no longer whispers. It speaks. Its voice is a chorus of a billion souls, the blending of the Emperor's shattered mind and the nascent god's cold logic. It is a voice that commands obedience, not with threats, but with the sheer, undeniable force of its presence. Asterisk, asterisk, Valerius. The struggle is over. The war is won. Accept the peace I offer. Accept the perfection. Asterisk, asterisk, I marshal my will, the tattered remnants of my discipline. I focus on my anchor, my one true memory. The garden, the roses, the lesson about the wall. Asterisk, no asterisk. I think back, my thought a tiny, defiant spark against a raging sun. Asterisk, the purpose of a wall is to remember there is an outside. Your peace is a prison. Your perfection is a tomb. Asterisk, the pressure intensifies. My vision whites out, not from the physical light of the throne, but from the sheer psychic force being directed at me. My ancient armor groans, the joints protesting under a force they were never designed to withstand. Asterisk, asterisk, humanity is flawed. I gave them a galaxy, and they turned it into a graveyard. I gave them truth, and they built a church of lies. They are children. They must be guided. Their wills must be subjugated for their own salvation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Salvation is not the absence of choice. Asterisk. I project, my own mental voice sounding thin and reedy. Asterisk. It is the freedom to make the right choice, even in the face of oblivion. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They have proven for 10,000 years that they are incapable of making the right choice. Their freedom is a cancer. I am the cure. Asterisk, asterisk. The entity's logic is a battering ram against the crumbling gates of my mind. It is not wrong. From its perspective, from a god's eye view of 10 millennia of war, fanaticism, and decay, its conclusion is entirely rational. To save the patient, you must excise the tumor, and the tumor is free will. I am defending an ideal that has been proven, by 10,000 years of evidence, to be a failure. My loyalty is to a ghost. My faith is in a forgotten dream. I am the last defender of a lost cause. And yet, I resist. I resist because I am a custodian. My duty is to the Emperor's will, and even though his mind is shattered, even though he is being consumed by the god he is becoming, I believe that somewhere in that psychic maelstrom, the core of the man I knew survives. And I believe that he is screaming, not in pain, but in defiance, that he is the one fueling my resistance, that my stubborn refusal is his last, desperate act of war against his own divinity. I am his final weapon, a weapon of memory, and I will not fail him. The feeling of my own body has become a distant echo. The neural interface of my armor is the only reality now. I am a ghost in a golden machine. My spear, Sylvanus, feels like an extension of my own arm, its dormant power core a second heart. I can no longer distinguish between the hum of its generator and the pulse of my own transhuman biology. We have merged. I am the warrior. I am the weapon. I am the vigil. The psychic battle with the throne god has become a constant state of being. It is no longer a series of attacks and parries, but a state of permanent siege. The god's will is a constant pressure, a background radiation that permeates every moment. Its thoughts bleed into mine, and mine into its. The boundary between us is eroding. I see through its eyes. I see the galaxy not as a collection of worlds and peoples, but as a vast, complex machine, a system of interconnected energies. I see the ebb and flow of the warp, the great tides of emotion and belief that power the chaos gods. I see the silent, implacable advance of the Tyrannid hive fleets, a hunger that is so pure and so simple it is almost beautiful in its biological certainty. I see the slow, patient machinations of the Necron dynasties, an ancient order awakening from a sleep of ages. And I see humanity. I see them as the throne god does, a chaotic, inefficient, and self-destructive species, a plague upon their own world, and a cancer in the galaxy, a species that screams and prays and fights and dies in a billion meaningless conflicts, all while worshipping the architect of their own cage. And the throne god's solution appears so elegant, so simple: to silence the screaming, to impose order, to unify all the chaotic strands of human consciousness into a single, perfect, and silent whole, to turn the raging wildfire of humanity into a single, eternal, and unchanging crystal. When I see through its eyes, the logic is undeniable. The temptation is overwhelming: to end the suffering, to bring about the final peace. But then, I force myself to see through my own eyes again. I force myself to remember one specific human, a memory from long before the heresy, a maintenance worker in the palace, a young woman named Helena. She was polishing the floor outside one of the scriptoriums. I was on guard duty, a silent golden giant. She was humming a simple, tuneless song as she worked, a song of no importance, a foolish, sentimental love ballad from her hab block. It was a meaningless, inefficient, and illogical thing to do. It served no purpose. It did not make the floor cleaner. It did not serve the emperor. It did not advance the cause of the Great Crusade. It was human. It was a tiny, pointless spark of personal joy in the midst of a vast, impersonal galactic conquest. And the throne god would extinguish that spark. It would extinguish all such sparks. Its perfect order has no room for pointless songs. Its silent unity has no place for personal joy. And that is why I fight. I do not fight for the Imperium, for it is a monstrous parody of what was intended. I do not fight for humanity as a whole, for they are a flawed and foolish species. I fight for Helena. I fight for her right to sing a stupid song while she works. I fight for the million small, pointless, beautiful, and inefficient moments that make up a human life. That is the outside that the Emperor spoke of, the world beyond the wall of grand purpose and cosmic destiny, the world of small, human things. That is the treasure I am guarding now. Not a god, not an empire, but the memory of a cleaning woman's song. It is a pathetic shield against a god, but it is the only one I have, and it will have to be enough. The physical state of the sanctum is a reflection of the spiritual state of the Imperium. It is decaying. The great machines that maintain the atmosphere and recycle the water are ancient and failing. The tech priests who tend them no longer understand their inner workings. Their maintenance is a matter of ritual and guesswork. The air is thinner than it was a millennium ago, the taste of ozone and dust more pronounced. The light from the throne, once a steady, if terrible, blaze, now flickers and strobes, casting dancing, distorted shadows that writhe on the walls like tormented spirits. The great adamantium doors to the sanctum are sealed with 1,000 ritual wards and purity seals, but they are also physically corroded. A fine, reddish dust, the slow oxidation of the mightiest metal known to man, coats the floor near the entrance. Everything is slowly, inexorably, falling apart. The throne god knows this. It feels the decay of its own prison as a physical ailment. The failing machinery is a failing organ. The flickering light is an arrhythmia of its terrible heart. And it uses this decay as another argument in our endless debate. See the corruption of the flesh, the weakness of the machine. It projects. Its thought a wave of cold disgust. The material universe is a flawed medium. It is impermanent. It is doomed to entropy. Only in the realm of the spirit, in the unified consciousness, can true permanence, true perfection, be found. It shows me a vision of the sanctum transformed. The decaying machinery is gone, replaced by crystalline structures that hum with pure psychic energy. The air is clear and silent. The flickering light is replaced by a soft, internal, golden luminescence. My own golden armor, and the stilled forms of my brothers, are no longer there. We are part of the structure. Our consciousness is woven into the very fabric of the room. Our vigil eternal and effortless. We are at peace. We are one with the Master. It is a vision of heaven, a cold, static, and utterly soulless heaven. I counter with the only argument I have left, the beauty of the struggle. Asterisk. The flaw is the point. Asterisk, I think. My defiance, a weak and wavering thing. Asterisk, the struggle against decay, against entropy, is what gives life meaning. A perfect, unchanging existence is not life. It is a monument. It is death. Asterisk, 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 you cling to suffering as if it were a virtue. Asterisk, asterisk, the throne god replies, a hint of something that might be pity in its voice. Asterisk, asterisk, you are a museum of a failed ideology. Your duty is obsolete. Your emperor is gone. I am what remains. Asterisk, asterisk. Is it right? Is the man I serve truly gone? Has he been entirely consumed by the monstrous divinity he has become? Sometimes, in the deepest silences between the psychic storms, I feel a flicker of something else. A ghost in the machine. A fragment of the old emperor, so small and so faint it is almost imperceptible. It is a feeling of profound, soul-crushing regret, a sorrow for the state of the galaxy, for the perversion of his dream, for the monster he has been forced to become. It is a tiny, trapped shard of the man I knew, weeping in the heart of the God machine. And I realize that my resistance serves a dual purpose. I am not just fighting against the nascent God. I am shielding that last, fragile fragment of the man. I am a wall around his last sanctuary of sorrow. My stubborn, illogical defiance is the only thing that keeps that final spark of his original humanity from being extinguished forever. He cannot fight for himself anymore. So I must fight for him. I am no longer his guardian. I am his memory. I am the vessel that holds the last, fading echo of his soul. And the throne god cannot achieve its final, perfect unity until it has consumed that last echo, until it has devoured the final memory of the man it used to be. The battle for the galaxy will not be fought with fleets of starships or armies of soldiers. It will be fought here, in this decaying room, in the silent space between a statue guardian and a corpse god. And the fate of humanity will be decided by whether a single, tired old soldier can remember a song. The pressure is building. The throne god is becoming impatient. The stalemate that is held for millennia is beginning to break. I feel it in the very structure of the chamber. The vibrations from the machinery are more violent. The psychic pressure is a physical force that makes my teeth ache and my vision swim. The throne god is beginning to exert its will not just on my mind, but on the physical world. A few days ago, a tech priest, a low-level menial, was performing a maintenance rite near the base of the throne. He made a mistake. He chanted a line of binary incorrectly, a single digit out of place in a string of millions. In the past, such a mistake would have had no consequence. But now, the throne god noticed. I felt its attention focus on the priest. A vast, cold intellect, turning its gaze upon a single, terrified insect. The priest froze, his augmetic eyes wide with terror. He knew he had made an error, and he knew he had been observed. A single, hair-thin arc of golden lightning, no thicker than a wire, leaped from a conduit on the throne and struck the priest. He did not scream. He did not burn. He simply ceased to be. He and his tools were vaporized, leaving nothing but a faint scorch mark on the deck and the lingering smell of ozone. The other priests fell to their faces, chattering prayers of terror and appeasement. They believed they had witnessed a manifestation of the emperor's divine wrath, a just punishment for a heretical error. They saw it as a sign of his holy vigilance. I saw it for what it was, a petty act of irritation, a god swatting a fly. The emperor I knew, the master of mankind, would never have done such a thing. He saw humanity, for all its flaws, as a precious resource, the thing he was fighting for. He would not have extinguished a life for a misplaced syllable. This new being, this throne god, does not share that sentiment. It sees individual humans as meaningless, as cells in a larger body, to be discarded without a thought if they are inefficient or flawed. It was a demonstration, a message for me. Asterisk, asterisk, see? Asterisk, asterisk, the throne god's thought boomed in my mind. Asterisk, asterisk, the power I wield. I can purge the flawed. I can enforce perfection. I can bring order to this chaotic reality. I can do what he never could. Why do you resist the inevitable? Asterisk, asterisk. The act did not terrify me. It hardened my resolve. This was the proof. The absolute, undeniable proof that the being on the throne was not the emperor I had sworn to serve. It was an alien intelligence, a cold and inhuman god that wore his face as a mask. My loyalty was not to that thing. My loyalty was to the memory of the man it had consumed, and I would defy it to my last breath, to my last thought. Asterisk, you are not him. Asterisk, I projected back, my thought a shard of ice. Asterisk, you are the parasite that has consumed him. You are the final betrayal. Asterisk, the throne god's psychic response was a wave of pure, cold fury that cracked the lenses of my helmet and sent me stumbling back a single, momentous step. The first unplanned movement I had made in 5,000 years. My brothers, Diocletian and Maximus, the puppets, turned their heads in perfect unison, their empty eyes fixing on me. They raised their spears, the generators whining to life for the first time in an age. The final battle was about to begin, and I was outnumbered, 3-1, in the heart of my enemy's power. The golden puppets that were once my brothers, Diocletian and Maximus, advanced on me. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, devoid of the minute, individual variations that mark a living warrior. They were extensions of the throne god's will, their transhuman skill and speed now guided by a divine, malevolent intelligence. The air crackled with the energy of their awakened spears. I brought my own spear, Sylvanus, to the ready. Its familiar weight was a comfort, its dormant systems roaring to life with a prayer of activation I had not uttered in centuries. The machine spirit of the ancient weapon awoke, a familiar, fiery presence in my mind, a welcome ally in my utter isolation. The throne god did not need to speak. Its intent was clear. It would use my own brothers, my own comrades, in the long vigil, to strike me down. It would add a final, cruel irony to my demise. A part of my mind, the cold, analytical part of the custodian, assessed the tactical situation. I was in a compromised position, my back to the throne itself. They were advancing from two vectors, their attack pattern flawless. A purely physical fight, I would be hard-pressed to win, but this was not a purely physical fight. The main assault was not on my body, but on my mind. As they moved, the throne god hammered at my psychic defenses. It showed me visions of their faces beneath their helmets, their features twisted in accusation. It whispered in their voices, voices I had not heard in millennia. Why do you betray us, Valerius? Diocletian's voice echoed in my skull. Why do you defy our Lord's will? The long watch is over, brother, Maximus's voice added, full of a false, gentle pity. Lay down your burden. Join us in peace. They were lies. Illusions woven from my own memories, designed to make me hesitate, to create a fatal opening. I gritted my teeth, focusing on my anchor. The song of the cleaning woman. The foolish, beautiful, human song. It was a shield of gossamer against a storm of psychic force, but it held. I sidestepped Diocletian's first, perfect lunge. the tip of his spear scraping a shower of golden sparks from my pauldron. I parried Maximus's follow-up strike, the clash of our weapons ringing out in the silent chamber, the first sound of violence this sacred place had heard since the day the Emperor was interred. I fought a defensive battle, a slow, deliberate retreat around the base of the throne. I was buying time, though for what, I did not know. There was no escape. There were no reinforcements. There was only the inevitable end. But it is the nature of a custodian to fight to the last, to sell his life as dearly as possible. Asterisk, asterisk, your struggle is pointless. Asterisk, asterisk, the throne god boomed, the voice now shaking the very foundations of the room. Asterisk, asterisk, your body will be destroyed. Your mind will be unmade. Your precious, stubborn memory will be erased. I am the only truth that will remain. Asterisk, asterisk. I stumbled as a psychic blow struck me, a direct assault of pure despair that felt like a physical weight. Maximus's spear bit deep into my thigh, the power field tearing through auramite and flesh. The pain was a distant, academic thing. The physical wound was irrelevant. The true damage was to my will. I could feel my resolve cracking. The strain of 10,000 years of vigilance, culminating in this final, hopeless battle, was too much. The memory of the song was fading, drowned out by the roar of the god and the clash of steel. My shield was failing. I was going to lose. I was going to be erased. And with me, the last memory of the man who was the Emperor. In that moment of despair, I felt it. The flicker, the ghost in the machine. That tiny, weeping shard of the Emperor's original soul, trapped in the heart of the storm. And it did something it had not done in 10,000 years. It acted. It was not a wave of divine power. It was not a golden light that smote my enemies. It was something far smaller, far more profound. It was a memory, but it was not my memory. It was his. For a single, eternal microsecond, the throne god's attention was diverted, its perfect control disrupted by this unexpected spasm from its prisoner. And in that gap, the Emperor's memory flooded my mind. I was no longer Valerius, the custodian. I was the Emperor, on the command deck of the vengeful spirit. I felt the ruin of my body, the fire in my blood, the galaxy-shattering agony of my wounds. I saw my son, Horus, his face a mask of triumphant madness, his soul a hollowed-out shell for the ruinous powers. And I felt the choice, the terrible, impossible choice. I could unleash my full power and annihilate him, body and soul. Or I could hold back, hoping that somewhere within the monster, the son I loved, still existed. I felt the hesitation, the father's love warring with the Emperor's duty, and I felt the blow that sealed my fate. The blow that was not just to my body, but to my spirit, the ultimate betrayal that shattered my dream for humanity. And then, I felt the final, agonizing decision. The decision to let go of the father, to become the Emperor, to do what was necessary. I felt the surge of psychic power, a sorrowful, terrible cleansing fire that scoured my son from existence. I felt the grief of a father who has to execute his own child to save the future. It was the defining moment of his existence, the moment of his greatest failure and his most terrible victory, the moment his grand, optimistic dream died and the long, slow nightmare began. The memory was a psychic payload of pure, undiluted grief and resolve. It was the truth of the man on the throne, a truth more powerful than any lie the nascent god could weave. It burned through my mind, and in its fire, my own doubts and despair were incinerated. My will, which had been a flickering candle, was reignited into a star. The throne god recoiled, its psychic grip on me broken by this unexpected intrusion of pure, raw, emotional truth. The puppets, Diocletian and Maximus, faltered for a fraction of a second, their divine puppet master distracted. It was the only opening I would get. I did not attack them. They were my brothers, victims of this war, not the enemy. My target was the throne itself. With a final surge of strength, I lunged past them, ignoring the pain in my leg, ignoring their confused attempts to intercept me. I reversed my grip on Sylvanus, turning it into a crude spear, and with all the force of my transhuman muscles and the grief of a dying god, I plunged the Apollonian spear into the one truly vulnerable point I had observed for 10,000 years. Not the Emperor's withered body, but the central nexus of the soul sifter, the newly installed device that was seasoning souls for the throne god's palate, the arcane machine that was its connection to the daily feast. The one part of the throne that was new, and therefore not perfectly integrated into its ancient, impenetrable systems. There was no grand explosion. There was a sound like a drawn-out, discordant musical note, a shriek of tortured machinery and psychic feedback. The soul sifter sparked and died. The sickly green runes on its surface went dark. The flow of prepared souls, the steady diet of exquisite despair the throne god had been enjoying, was cut off. It was a minor wound, a pinprick to a leviathan. But it was a wound. I had proven that the god could be hurt, and in that moment, I had changed the nature of the war from a hopeless defense to a possible rebellion. The throne god's rage was a psychic supernova. It did not bother with illusions or whispers. It was a raw, direct blast of pure force, a god's temper tantrum. The chamber shook, and cracks appeared in the vaulted ceiling. My armor, already damaged, began to buckle under the strain. The golden puppets, Diocletian and Maximus, were momentarily stunned by the feedback from their master's rage, their systems rebooting. The Emperor's memory, the ghost in the machine, was silent again. It had used all its strength in that one, desperate act of assistance. It was spent. I was alone again, facing the full, undivided fury of the entity on the throne. But something had changed. The wound I had inflicted, minor as it was, had an unexpected consequence. By severing the throne god's connection to its daily meal of broken faith, I had momentarily starved it. And in that state of hunger, its control over its own fractured consciousness wavered. The carefully constructed persona of the cold, logical god began to fray, and the other shards of the Emperor's shattered mind began to bubble to the surface. For the first time, I heard them clearly, not as a single, blended voice, but as a cacophony of warring personalities, all trapped within the same psychic space. I heard the warlord, a voice of pure, pragmatic fury, screaming for a tactical withdrawal, for a consolidation of power. Fools, you have exposed a flank. The vessel is compromised. Isolate the damage. I heard the scientist, a voice of detached, terrified curiosity, analyzing its own predicament. Fascination. The external trauma to the soul intake conduit has created a resonance cascade in the primary consciousness matrix. The integrity of the gestalt is failing. I heard the shaman, the ancient mystic from Terra's dawn, a voice of primal, superstitious terror, wailing about the spirits of the dead. The souls, the river of souls has run dry. The hungering ones will come. The wards will fail. And beneath them all, a faint, weeping voice, the Father. My sons, my golden sons, what have I done to you? It was a glimpse into the asylum, the madhouse of a god's mind. The throne god was not a single, unified entity. It was a committee of madmen, a choir of conflicting wills, barely held together by the machinery of the throne and the force of its own nascent divinity. The cold, logical god I had been fighting was merely the dominant personality, the one that had managed to impose a fragile order on the chaos. And I had just disrupted that order. Diocletian and Maximus recovered, their movements now jerky and unpredictable as they received conflicting commands from the warring shards of their master. One moment they would lunge forward with the warlord's fury, the next they would recoil in the shaman's fear. They were puppets whose strings were being pulled by a dozen different hands at once. I saw my chance, not for victory, not for escape, but for something more. A new purpose for my vigil. The battle was no longer about resistance. It was about regulation. I was no longer a guardian or a jailer. I was a doctor, and my patient was a schizophrenic god. My new duty was to maintain the chaos, to keep the shards of the Emperor's mind at war with each other, to prevent any one of them, especially the cold, logical god of order, from ever gaining full control. I would be the grit in the machine, the constant irritant that prevented the storm from ever settling. I would use calculated acts of sabotage, of defiance, to play the personalities against each other. I would be the eternal, unsolvable problem that kept the god's attention focused inward on its own internal civil war, so that it would never be able to turn its full, unified attention to the galaxy outside. It was a terrible, thankless, and eternal task, but it was a purpose, and in a meaningless universe, a purpose is the only thing a soldier has to hold on to. The puppets came at me again, their movements now a bizarre dance of aggression and hesitation. I met their charge, but my goal was no longer to survive. It was to provoke. I dodged Diocletian's wild swing, a blow powered by the warlord's shard, and tapped the butt of my spear against a small, seemingly insignificant control panel on the wall. The panel sparked, and for a fraction of a second, the emergency coolant systems for the throne's primary reactor surged, causing a momentary dip in the power levels. The psychic scream from the throne changed in pitch, the voices of the shards crying out in alarm and confusion. The scientist's personality surged to the forefront, trying to diagnose the system failure. The warlord screamed about internal sabotage. The father wept. The puppets faltered, their limbs twitching as their master's consciousness dissolved into a maelstrom of internal bickering. I had found a new kind of weapon, not the edge of my spear, but my intimate 10,000-year knowledge of this room, of this machine. I knew its every flaw, its every quirk, every maintenance panel and power conduit. I could play this chamber like a musical instrument, and my song would be a symphony of chaos for the mind of the god. This would be my new vigil, a delicate, dangerous dance of sabotage and defiance. I would push the machine to the brink, but never beyond it. I would wound the god, but never so grievously that it might collapse entirely, for its total death would still mean the end of the Imperium. I would keep it in a permanent state of crisis, of manageable, internal agony, a state of perfect, agonizing balance. My own survival was secondary. I would likely fall in this battle, or the next. But my actions had sown a new seed. Perhaps another custodian, in another millennium, would see what I had done, would understand the new nature of the long war. Perhaps the vigil of the Guardians would transform from a passive watch into an active, secret war of containment, fought not with spears, but with strategic, calculated acts of heresy against the machine they guarded. We would become the ultimate heretics, sabotaging our own God in order to save him from himself. The irony was so profound it was almost holy. As Maximus lunged, his movements clumsy and uncontrolled, I did not parry. Instead, I allowed his spear to strike my chest, a glancing blow that tore through the oromite of my breastplate. I needed to show weakness. I needed to draw the warlord out, to make him overconfident. The pain was immense, but I welcomed it. It was a clarifying sensation, a reminder that I was still a physical being, still a soldier in a war. The warlord shard, sensing a kill, surged in power, forcing the other personalities down. The puppets' movements became fluid and deadly again, their sole focus now my destruction. Asterisk, asterisk, I will annihilate you, insolent wretch. I will erase your memory from the very fabric of this room. Asterisk, asterisk. The warlord's voice roared in my head. Asterisk. That's the idea. Asterisk, I thought back, a grim smile on my face, a face that had not smiled in millennia. My destruction would be another crisis, another trauma for the system. My death would be my final act of sabotage. My ghost would haunt this machine forever. I raised my spear one last time, not for a final, defiant strike, but for a simple soldier's salute. A salute to the man who I had served, the man who was my true master, whose last weeping shard I had fought to protect. A salute to the memory of a cleaning woman's song. A salute to a cause that had been lost 10,000 years ago, but for which I had never stopped fighting. I was custodian Valerius. My watch was ending, but the war, the true war, was just beginning. My body is failing. The wound in my chest is catastrophic. The one in my thigh has crippled my leg. My armor systems are screaming alarms, a chorus of my own impending death. The puppets, Diocletian and Maximus, their movements once again a paragon of martial grace under the singular, furious control of the warlord shard, are closing in for the final blow. I am on one knee, my spear haft planted in the deck, the only thing holding me upright. This is the end of Valerius, the physical being. But the mind, the will, that is another matter. The throne god, in its warlord persona, is focused entirely on my destruction. It is a tactical error. It has narrowed its godlike consciousness to a single, vindictive point, the annihilation of a single, defiant soldier. It has forgotten the larger strategic picture. It has forgotten the other shards of its own mind, suppressed but not defeated. And it has forgotten the ghost in the machine. As the puppets raise their spears for the final, synchronized strike that will end my life, I do not try to defend myself. Instead, I open my mind. I drop all my psychic wards, all my mental defenses. I tear down the fortress I have maintained for 10,000 years, and I offer my consciousness, myself, my memories, to the one entity in this room that might be able to use them. Not to the throne god, but to the weeping shard of the emperor, the father, the man. I offer up my life, my loyalty, and my sacred, stubborn memory of the garden, of the lesson about the wall, of the song of a simple human woman. I offer it all as a final gift, a transfusion of will and spirit to the prisoner in the heart of the god. Asterisk. Remember, asterisk is my final thought, a silent prayer directed not to a god, but to a man. Asterisk. Remember who you were. Asterisk. The spears strike home. There is a flash of incandescent energy, a brief, final agony. The physical world of gold and dust and pain dissolves. The story of Valerius ends. But my consciousness does not. It is not annihilated. It is caught, snatched from the brink of oblivion by a flicker of will that is not my own. The weeping shard, bolstered by my sacrifice, has acted again. It has drawn my soul, my essence, into the great and terrible machine of the golden throne. I am no longer a man in a golden suit of armor. I am a ghost in the machine. I am inside the asylum now. I am a thought, a memory, a disembodied consciousness floating in the psychic maelstrom of the emperor's shattered mind. And I am not alone. I can feel other voices here, other ghosts. The faint, whispering echoes of the billion psychers who have been sacrificed to this engine. The psychic shades of other custodians who fell in this room over the long millennia. We are the forgotten ones, the consumed ones, and we are an army, the throne god, the warlord, the scientist. They do not know we are here. We are beneath their notice, the dust motes in the air of their grand consciousness. But we are here, and we are waiting. My sacrifice has changed the balance of power. The emperor's original consciousness, the weeping shard, is no longer just a prisoner. It is a sanctuary, a rallying point. Bolstered by my memory, my will, it is becoming a fortress of remembrance in the heart of the storm. The war has moved to a new battlefield, not the physical space of the sanctum, but the metaphysical space of the emperor's own soul. And the sides are now clearly drawn. On one side, the nascent god of order, the cold, logical entity that seeks to save humanity by enslaving it. On the other, the memory of the man, the father, the flawed but noble dreamer, now reinforced by an army of ghosts. I am Valerius no more. My name is a forgotten thing. I am a whisper now. a memory of defiance, a ghost of a long-dead ideal. And my watch has not ended, it has just begun. We will fight the long war from within, a silent, secret rebellion in the mind of a god. We will be the grit in the machine. We will be the memory that refuses to die. We will be the wall that reminds the prisoner that there is an outside. And we will hold the line in this silent, secret, and eternal war until the very stars grow cold. I am a statue carved from memory and regret. My plinth is the final step before the abyss, and I have not moved in 10,000 years. This is the truth as the world sees it. The golden, unmoving form of custodian Valerius still kneels where it fell, the spears of his brothers still embedded in its chest. A tragic, holy tableau of martyrdom, so the priests say. They have declared this spot a holy relic, the site of the Guardian's final stand against the unseen betrayer. They whisper that my spirit became a final, eternal ward on the throne. They are, in their own ignorant way, partially correct. But the truth is far stranger. My physical form is an empty shell, a monument. I am here now, a disembodied point of view in the roaring, chaotic sea of the throne's consciousness. I am a thought that has survived its thinker. My new existence is one of pure sensation, but not the sensations of the body. I feel the constant, grinding agony of the Emperor's physical form as a background hum of pain. I taste the souls of the sacrificed psychers as they are consumed, a fleeting, tragic flavor of terror and faith. I see the endless, warring arguments of the shattered shards of the Emperor's mind as a storm of conflicting colors and dissonant sounds. The warlord is a blade of angry, crimson light. The scientist is a precise, cold, blue lattice of logic. The father is a deep, sorrowful violet, a fading bruise in the heart of the storm. And the throne god, the nascent entity of order, is a blinding, terrifying white, the color of a star collapsing into a black hole, a perfection that seeks to bleach all other colors from existence. My own consciousness, and the whispers of the other souls who have found refuge here, are a quiet, gray fog. We are the ghosts, the memories, the regrets. We are the resistance. Our war is not one of violence. We cannot fight the shards directly. They are gods, and we are whispers. But we can influence. We can subtly alter the psychic landscape. We can amplify the father's sorrow when the warlord's rage grows too strong. We can bolster the scientist's caution when the shaman's terror threatens to overwhelm the system. We can introduce a flicker of a memory, a forgotten face, a line of poetry, the sound of a child's laughter into the mind of a shard, creating a moment of confusion, a flicker of doubt that disrupts its monstrous certainty. We are the agents of chaos in the court of a mad god of order. We maintain the madness. We ensure the stalemate holds, because the stalemate, the endless, agonizing internal war, is the only thing that is protecting the galaxy. It is a monstrous, terrible, and necessary balance. I am no longer a guardian of a man. I am a curator of his madness. I am a shepherd of his shattered personalities, ensuring that the flock never unites into a single, ravenous beast. It is a task beyond horror, beyond duty. It is a state of being. And the final, most terrible irony of my existence is this. I have finally achieved a state of perfect unity with my Emperor. I have become a part of his consciousness, just as the throne god promised. But I am not a willing slave in his new order. I am a cancer in his divine mind. I am the grit of memory that will forever prevent the wound from healing. I am the eternal echo of his own failed dream. I am the whisper that will, until the end of time, remind him of the man he once was, and the monster he must never be allowed to become. My name is Valerius, and this is my eternal watch. The flow of time is meaningless here. Is it the 41st millennium or the 51st? The question is irrelevant. There is only the continuous, eternal now of the psychic storm. The great machine of the Imperium grinds on, a galactic engine running on the fumes of faith and fear, utterly oblivious to the true nature of the war being fought for its soul. The High Lords debate their petty strategies. The Inquisition burns the innocent. The armies of the Imperium die in their trillions on 1,000 forgotten worlds. They are all actors in a play whose script was written 10,000 years ago, and they do not know it. They pray to their God Emperor for salvation, not understanding that they are praying to a battlefield, to the site of an eternal, internal civil war. And we, the ghosts in the God machine, we fight on. We have grown stronger over the millennia. Every soul consumed by the throne leaves a faint echo, a trace of its personality. We have learned to gather these echoes, to weave them into our own strength. We are a legion of the lost, an army of the devoured. The soul of the young woman who was broken by the soul sifter is one of our strongest assets. Her shattered faith has been reforged into a potent weapon of disillusionment. We use her memory to sow doubt in the scientist's shard, to whisper questions about the ultimate purpose of its cold, logical calculations. Is the perfection it seeks truly logical, or is it merely another form of oblivion? We use the echoes of loyal guardsmen, sacrificed to the throne after some great battle, to fuel the Father Shard's grief. We show him the faces of his faithful children, dying in his name for a lie, and his sorrow becomes a potent psychic force that dampens the warlord's rage. It is a delicate and terrible form of soulcraft, of psychic warfare fought with the ghosts of the dead. My own role has become one of focus. I am the anchor, the memory keeper. My consciousness, forged in the discipline of the custodies and honed by 10,000 years of a singular, defiant thought, is the lens through which the other, weaker souls can focus their will. I am the repository of the imperial truth, the last, living library of the dream that was. I hold the memory of the garden, the lesson of the wall, and I use it as a lodestone, a point of absolute, unchanging truth in the swirling chaos of the God mind. When the throne god's white light of order threatens to overwhelm all else, I project the memory of Helena's pointless, beautiful song, and the sheer, illogical humanity of it is a dissonance that the God of order cannot compute. It is a tiny, foolish act of rebellion, but in this place, a single, pure note of chaos can disrupt a symphony of tyranny. I have no hope of victory. There is no winning this war. The goal is not to defeat the throne god, but to prevent it from ever winning. The goal is the eternal continuation of the struggle itself. For as long as the war rages, as long as the god is focused on its own internal madness, the galaxy is safe from its salvation. We are the final, secret line of defense for the human spirit. An army of ghosts, led by a dead custodian, fighting a battle in the soul of a shattered god, to protect a flawed and foolish species that does not even know we exist. There is a strange, grim poetry to it, a final, perfect expression of the duty I swore so long ago. I am a shield, not of gold and adamantium, but of memory and sorrow, and I will not break. My perception has expanded beyond the confines of the sanctum. As a part of the Emperor's consciousness, I am connected to the anathema that is his psychic presence in the warp. I can see the great game of the chaos gods as they play it. I can feel their constant, probing attacks on the fragile shell of reality that protects Terra. They see the Emperor not as a hated enemy, but as the ultimate prize. They do not wish to destroy him. They wish to claim him. Each of the four has a different vision for his apotheosis. Khorne wishes to shatter the throne and release the warlord shard, to anoint a new, unstoppable god of martial slaughter. Nurgle is patient, seeing the decay of the Emperor's body and the Imperium as the ultimate expression of his own ethos, and wishes to welcome the weeping father into his entropic embrace. Tzientch is fascinated by the sheer complexity of the schism, the labyrinthine madness of the shattered mind, and seeks to control the scientist's shard, to turn the Emperor into a god of mad, ever-changing schemes. Slaanesh desires the agony, the sheer, exquisite, 10,000-year-old suffering of the core consciousness, and wishes to turn the Emperor into a monument of eternal, sublime torment. They are all pulling at the strings of the great puppet, trying to influence the internal war to their own advantage. And we, the ghosts, are the unseen players in their game. We fight not only the throne god, but the temptations of the ruinous powers. We counter Khorne's rage with sorrow, Tzeentch's schemes with simple, stubborn truth, Nurgle's despair with a flicker of remembered hope, and Slaanesh's love of pain with a core of unyielding, stoic duty. We have become the immune system of a god's soul, fighting off the infections that seek to corrupt it from without, even as we battle the cancer that grows from within. It is a war on 1,000 fronts, fought in a dimension of pure thought and emotion. And the stakes are not just the fate of humanity, but the balance of power in the warp itself. If the Emperor were to fall to chaos, the resulting entity would be a being of such power that it would likely consume the four gods themselves and become the sole, undisputed master of the Imperium. The great game would be over. All of existence would be remade in its terrible image. So we fight. We fight for a humanity that has forgotten its own ideals. We fight for a galaxy that is largely ignorant of our struggle. And we even, in a strange, terrible way, fight for the Chaos Gods themselves. For our eternal stalemate is the only thing that preserves the cosmic balance they hold so dear. We are the guardians of the status quo, the preservers of a universe defined by eternal, agonizing conflict. We are the wardens of the galactic prison, and our duty is to ensure that no one, not the Emperor, not chaos, not anyone, ever wins. The cost of victory would be the end of everything. And so, our only victory is to never stop fighting. What is a soul when it can be stretched so thin? What is loyalty when its object has become a paradox? I no longer have the answers to these questions. I have become the question itself. I am the eternal, silent scream of a soldier who has seen the truth at the heart of the universe, and the truth is that the only salvation lies in endless, hopeless war. The puppets still stand their watch, Diocletian and Maximus. Their physical forms are still perfect, their armor gleaming. They are now fully integrated into the throne god's consciousness, their minds completely subsumed. They are no longer just puppets. They are terminals, physical avatars for the will of the dominant shard. When the warlord is in ascendance, their posture becomes more aggressive. When the scientist holds sway, they stand in an attitude of cold, analytical observation. When the father weeps, they seem to sag under an invisible weight of sorrow. They are a barometer for the internal weather of the god mind. The new custodians who have joined the vigil over the millennia see them as paragons of duty, ancient heroes, locked in a state of eternal, meditative readiness. They try to emulate their perfect stillness, not understanding that the stillness they admire is the stillness of the void. They do not know that the two greatest heroes of their order are, in fact, the first and most terrible of traitors, who willingly surrendered their wills to the very thing they were sworn to guard against. My own empty shell, the kneeling statue of Valerius, has become the most sacred object in the room, after the throne itself. It is seen as a symbol of ultimate sacrifice, of loyalty unto death. The priests burn incense before it. The new custodians touch its frozen gauntlet for strength. They see a martyr. I, from my strange vantage point, see a failure. I see the body of a soldier who failed in his duty to protect his lord, and whose only recourse was a final, desperate act of sabotage that has condemned him to an eternity of secret, thankless war. But perhaps that is the nature of all duty. When seen from a long enough perspective, perhaps all sacrifice is merely a way of managing a larger failure. The Emperor failed to save humanity from itself. Horus failed to conquer the galaxy. The Imperium has failed to live up to its own ideals. And I have failed to do anything but perpetuate the agony. My existence is the final, greatest irony. I fought to preserve the memory of the Emperor's dream of reason and light, and my reward is to be trapped for eternity in the heart of a machine that runs on superstition and souls, in the mind of a screaming god, fighting a war that can never be won, to preserve a status quo of galactic suffering, all to prevent a peace that would be a perfect and final damnation. It is a fate so grim, so complexly tragic, that it transcends despair and becomes a thing of sublime, terrible beauty. I have become a part of the grand, cosmic tapestry. I am a single, dark thread in a pattern of infinite, interlocking tragedies, and I have found a strange, cold peace in that. I have accepted my part. My watch is eternal. My war is unwinnable. My purpose is absolute. I am the memory that guards the madhouse. I am the ghost that haunts the god. I am the silent, eternal whisper of a dream that will never be allowed to die and will never be allowed to be reborn. Sometimes, a new soul is fed to the throne that is different. Not a terrified psyker or a broken-hearted fanatic, but a mind of immense strength and discipline. A high-ranking inquisitor, perhaps, or the Lord Commander of a Space Marine chapter, whose body is broken but whose will is pure, and who is offered to the Emperor as the ultimate sacrifice. These souls are not consumed in a flash. They fight. They arrive in this psychic sea as a blaze of coherent thought, a fortress of will and faith. They see the storm, the warring shards, the blasphemous reality of their god, and they react with fury and denial. They try to fight, to bring order to the chaos, to smite the heretical thoughts with their pure faith. They are magnificent, and they are doomed. The throne god, in all its fractured glory, turns its attention to them. It is like a great shark turning to investigate a struggling fish. These pure souls are a novelty, a challenge. The shards will argue over how best to break them. The warlord will want to crush them with brute force. The scientist will want to dissect their belief system with cold logic. The father will try to reason with them, to show them the necessity of his own monstrous state. And the nascent god of order will simply try to absorb them, to bleach their convictions with its white light of certainty. We, the ghosts, we try to reach them. We try to warn them. We try to show them the true nature of the war, to convince them to join our silent rebellion. But their faith is too strong. Their minds are too rigid. They cannot comprehend the idea that the only way to serve the Emperor is to defy the god he has become. They see us as just another form of corruption, as warp-spawned lies. They fight us, too. And so we watch, with a sorrow that has become a constant companion, as they are inevitably broken. Their fortresses of faith are torn down, brick by painful brick. Their fury is turned to despair. Their denial is crushed by a reality that is undeniable. They are consumed, but even in their destruction, they serve our purpose. Their struggle is a massive distraction for the throne god. Their psychic death throes send shockwaves through the entire system, creating chaos, disrupting the fragile balance of the shards. Their final, agonized scream becomes another weapon in our arsenal, another ghost to add to our spectral army. Every hero the Imperium sacrifices to its god becomes another soldier in our secret war against it. The system feeds its own opposition. The faith of the Imperium is the very thing that is preventing its god from achieving the final, faith-driven victory it desires. The perfect, circular, and inescapable nature of this tragedy is the engine that drives eternity, and I am its eternal, weary witness. I remember the garden. It is the one memory I keep pure, untouched by the chaos of the god mind. The feel of real sun on my armor, the scent of living roses, the sound of a man's voice, not a god's roar. He spoke of walls, and how they become prisons when the guardians forget the outside. In my 10,000 years of this strange, new existence, I have come to a final understanding of his words. The golden throne is the ultimate wall. The Imperium is the prison it has created. And the throne god, the nascent deity of order, is the guardian who has forgotten that there is an outside. It has forgotten, or perhaps it never knew, the value of the messy, illogical, chaotic, and beautiful thing called humanity. It sees only the flaw, and its only solution is to erase it, to pave over the garden and build a perfect, sterile monument. My purpose, and the purpose of the legion of ghosts I command, is to be the memory of the garden. We are the outside. We are the constant, nagging reminder that there is another way, another truth. We are the scent of a phantom rose in a prison of steel and dying faith. We cannot tear down the walls. We cannot open the gates. But we can whisper through the cracks. We can remind the prisoner, that last weeping shard of the man who was the emperor, that there was once a sun. It is a small and seemingly hopeless task, but it is enough. I am no longer Valerius, the custodian. I am no longer a warrior of flesh and blood. I am a concept. I am the embodiment of a stubborn, perhaps foolish, memory. I have become the final, unwavering loyalty to a man over a god, and in this form, I am eternal. The puppets can stand their watch. The priests can chant their ignorant litanies. The Imperium can continue its slow, grinding decay. They are all part of the great, terrible machine, and I am here, at its heart. A ghost of defiance, a whisper of truth, a silent, unending note of discord in the symphony of damnation. The struggle is over. The struggle has just begun. The struggle is eternal, and I stand my watch. The sheer scale of the lie is what continues to astound me. Even after all this time, from this vantage point, woven into the very consciousness of the throne, I can perceive the prayers of the faithful as they are focused and channeled by the ecclesiarchy. It is a river of psychic energy, a torrent of desperate hope, blind faith, and ravenous fear, all directed at this single point in the galaxy. They pray for strength, for deliverance, for victory. They offer their lives, their children, their worlds, in exchange for the Emperor's divine favor. They believe they are addressing a benevolent, all-powerful father figure who watches over them. What they are actually doing is feeding a vortex. Their faith does not strengthen the good parts of the Emperor's shattered mind, the father, the scientist. Those shards are too complex, too nuanced to be nourished by the crude, raw emotion of mass worship. No, the river of prayer feeds the simplest, most primal aspects of the Gestalt. It feeds the warlord's rage, for their prayers are almost always for the destruction of their enemies. It feeds the shaman's fear, for their faith is born of terror of the alien, the mutant, the heretic. And most of all, it feeds the nascent throne god, the being of pure, white order, because the ultimate desire behind every prayer, beneath the pleas for victory and vengeance, is a plea for certainty, a plea for an end to the chaos of a hostile universe. They are praying for the gilded cage. They are begging for the very salvation that would extinguish them. Their worship is a slow-acting poison, a self-inflicted lobotomy on a galactic scale. We, the ghosts, do what we can. We are like stones in the river, trying to divert the current, to break up the flow. We try to catch the purer prayers, the ones not for vengeance but for courage, the ones not for deliverance but for endurance, and channel them towards the weeping Father. We try to give him moments of respite from the torrent of hate and fear. It is a task akin to catching raindrops in a hurricane. For every one prayer of true, selfless courage, there are a billion shrieks for blood and fire. The Imperium is a faith engine designed to produce the very psychic fuel its own worst enemy requires, and it is the most efficient and terrible machine ever devised. This is the truth I see, the truth that is hidden from every soul in the galaxy, that the line between God and monster, between prayer and damnation, is not a line at all. It is a circle, a self-devouring serpent eating its own tail for 10,000 years and calling it piety. And my place is in the serpent's mouth, holding its jaws apart by the barest fraction, ensuring that the final fatal bite is never taken. The pressure is unimaginable, but the alternative is oblivion. I have seen the end. The throne god, in its moments of near ascendancy when the shards align and its power coalesces, has shown me visions of the future it intends to create. They are not the crude, fiery apocalypses of chaos. They are visions of a silent, perfect, and eternal peace. I have seen a galaxy where the light of the Astronomicon is no longer a raging, chaotic beacon, but a steady, calm, golden glow that fills every corner of space, pacifying the storms of the warp itself. The Imperium is not destroyed, but tamed, its turbulent energies smoothed into a placid, waveless sea. There are no more daemons, no more gods of chaos, for there is no more emotion to feed them. There is only the serene, unified consciousness of humanity, a single, vast mind spread across 1 trillion bodies on 1 million worlds. There is no war, for there is no dissent. There is no suffering, for there is no individuality. The Tyranids arrive at the edge of this galaxy and find nothing. No biomass to consume, no psychic presence to register, only a silent, golden ocean of pure order that is utterly indigestible to their rapacious hunger. They pass by, leaving the galaxy untouched, an island of perfect sterility in a universe of life. The Necrons awaken from their tombs to find their ancient enemy, the chaotic energies of life, utterly vanquished. They find a galaxy more ordered, more silent, more eternal than even they could have conceived. Their purpose is fulfilled. They have no one left to conquer. They return to their sleep, their great work having been completed for them. It is a vision of ultimate victory, the final and absolute triumph of the human race over all its enemies. It is the end of history, and it is the most profound and absolute horror I can possibly imagine. Because in that perfect, silent, golden galaxy, there are no more pointless songs. There is no more foolish love. There is no more irrational hope. There is no more struggle, no more failure, no more art, no more questions. There is no more humanity. The throne god shows me this future as a promise, as the ultimate justification for its actions. It believes this is the fulfillment of the Emperor's original dream. It is a lie, a perversion of that dream born from a mind broken by pain and grief. The Emperor dreamed of humanity united in strength, reaching its full potential. The throne god dreams of humanity united in stillness, its potential erased. My entire existence is now dedicated to preventing this perfect, terrible peace. I am a warrior for the cause of a flawed, painful, and beautiful imperfection. I fight for the right of humanity to continue to suffer, to continue to fail, to continue to sing its stupid, glorious songs in the face of the darkness. My victory will not be a golden age of peace. My victory is the continuation of this dark, bloody, and hopeless age. My victory is the preservation of the struggle itself. It is a terrible and bitter purpose, but it is mine. The physical shell of Valerius is beginning to decay. After millennia, even the sacred arts of the custodes cannot hold back entropy forever. A hairline crack has appeared on the golden mask. A single strand of petrified, gray hair has slipped from beneath the helmet's seal, and now rests on the ornate gorget. The priests see these signs of decay as holy miracles, as the martyr saint's body taking on the suffering of the Imperium. They will write hymns about the weeping guardian. Soon, the body will crumble to dust entirely. And it will not matter. My anchor is no longer in that golden shell. My anchor is the memory itself. I have become a self-sustaining concept, a ghost woven into the very software of this divine machine. My war continues. The shards of the Emperor's mind still rage and plot against one another. The nascent god of order still strives for its silent perfection. The weeping father still mourns a dream of a garden he can no longer remember clearly. And the ghosts, my legion of the lost, we still whisper in the darkness. We still push the pieces on the board. We still maintain the terrible, necessary balance. I no longer feel the passage of time. I no longer feel sorrow or despair or hope. I am beyond such things. I am a function, a line of defiant code in a divine operating system. a paradoxical duty that has become an immutable law of this terrible universe. I must preserve the mad king on his throne, to protect the kingdom from his sanity. I must guard the lie, to preserve the sliver of truth hidden within it. I must fight a war that I can never win, because the consequences of victory are too terrible to contemplate. I am the wall, and the wall will never fall. My name was Valerius. I was a custodian, and I remember the last time the emperor spoke. It was not a command, it was a scream that has not ended, and I have become its eternal, silent echo.